Hello to everybody. Thank you to be here for the conference. For me, it's a pleasure, honor to be here with you. Thanks to Father Javier. You know, we are friends from 99. It's a past century, yes. Today, we desire to talk about our current Pope, Pope Leo XIV. I desire to start with a video.
Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus Papam. Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae Cardinalem Prevost, qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem XIV.
One year ago, after 4 voting, he was elected Pope. A few months ago, in a new book with some indiscretions, we know, but we are not sure, maybe the Pope received 108 votes, more or less 81% of the voters. So, it's a strong majority, not only 2/3, but more and more. But who is Pope Leo? We have several interpretations. If you see the New York Post 1 year ago, the Chicago Pope. But if you change country, you go into South America, in Peru, another title, Un Papa Peruano, a Peruvian Pope. Who is Pope Leo? It's a complex to give an answer because it's complex the life of the new Pope. He is American, but also Peruvian in his passport. But he's more and more from Chicago, but missionary in Latin America, superior, general superior of Augustinian as a religious, for 12 years in Rome. When you are the general of an order, you stay in Rome, but you travel everywhere in the world. So he was present in every country where an Augustinian community was. After he came back to Peru as Bishop Chiclayo, after in Rome 2 years in Roman Curia as Cardinal. Who is Pope Leo? We can talk about the global Pope. Not because he has 2 passports, but because his experience was really international, global. According to the new books in the last year, we can say the previous election was a fruit of a Gregorian part inside the conclave with the support of a conservative side. So he is not only a man of one party. Sorry, I use this word party. I don't like normally. But when we say in conclave, we have several groups of cardinals. And when you vote, you are for one man, not for another man. So we can talk in this context about party. So the Prevost was not a man only for one party, but he was a man able to receive many voters because in him was possible to recognize different preoccupations, desires for the present and the future of the Church between cardinals. If you remember, the weeks before election, in a general congregation of cardinals, we have many news on the newspapers. It is newspapers we can read now, 1 year ago. There was problems about unity inside the Church, conflicts. So the ideal Pope was a Pope of reconciliation, a Pope of the unity. And the profile of Cardinal Prevost was a good profile in face of these exigencies. So he was a man of doctrine, but also involved in the social and missionary causes, promoting human dignity, but also interesting in the ceremonial protocols. So, men of different skills. What is, I said before, who is Prevost? Who is the new Pope? The first act of his governance was the name, the new name. In the new name, we have also a program of the pontificate. You know, in the weeks before, some people decide, I desire a new Pope Francis II. I desire John Paul III and Paul VII, Benedict XVI, 17. But he didn't use the names of his predecessors of the 20th century and 21st century. He decided another name, the name of the last Pope of the 19th century, Leo XIII. When you use a name, you see a program. When I give you an example, John Paul I, only 1 month as Pope, very short pontificate. What is the first time in 2000 years that we have a Pope with two names? Why? Because we were at the time in the conflict after Second Vatican Council. There was 2 legacies. The legacy of Pope John XXIII and the legacy of the Pope Paul VI. 2 different ways to consider, to understand the council. So, this new Pope decided to use the two names because he decided to be man of unification. When Prevost decides to have the name Leo, it was a good idea for me, not because he's a Pope, good idea for simple level because it was impossible to recognize in him a man one part, a man, a pope for everybody. Do you know why a pope changed the name? The first case in the history was in the 6th century. The elected has a special name, Mercury, a pagan deity. So for a bishop of Rome, it's not a good name. So he decided to change. He changed, but the tradition to change always is in the 11th century, when we have in Rome the German popes, because the German emperor was very emperor was very strong. So was it possible for emperor to decide the pope? It is German popes to be recognized in Rome started to use Roman names, the name of the first popes. So in this case, the new name was to be Roman. We have only two exceptions in the history. Two popes in 1,000 years didn't change the name. Marcello Cervini and Adrian Florence, two short pontificates. So, Father Javier, when you will be Pope, change the name for a long pontificate. Okay, remember. When Prevost was elected Pope, he received a question. By what name do you wish to be called? And he said, my name will be Leo. And the inspiration was the Leo XIII, the Pope of Rerum Novarum, of the social doctrine of the Church. But Pope Leo XIII was also a good friend of Augustinian community. He was devoted of Our Lady of Good Counsel. It was Leo XIII to introduce the title in the litanies. Thanks an Augustinian father, the confessor of the Pope was Augustinian. And do you know this place is in Vatican Palace, Apostolic Palace, is at the Pauline Chapel. Why this picture here? Because the conclave doesn't start in Sixtine Chapel, but in this chapel of Pauline Chapel, where the cardinals have the meeting, first meeting, after there is the procession with the song to Holy Spirit. What we see in this chapel? This one is very small, I know, sorry. You see very well, the picture is very small, is the image of Our Lady of the Good Counsel. It was Pope Leo XIII to put this image in the chapel. And here, in front of the altar of the chapel, there is the coat of arms of Pope Leo XIII. So when Prevost was in the chapel in the beginning of conclave, around him we have the presence of Pope Leo XIII in the Augustinian tradition. Pope Leo XIII takes this name because he was in good relation with the Pope of his young age, Pope Leo XII. And this Pope takes the name Leo because he was devoted to Leo the Great, it is the title of your parish. So the last inspiration was the Leo the Great. Leo the Great, Leo the XII, Leo the XIII, 3 popes with a very spiritual vision of the reality. So not all pope is religious. It's strange maybe, but not all pope is really religious. But in the tradition of this name, this genealogy of the name Leo, we have a clear spiritual and religious line. What is the prospect after 1 year of his pontificate? What we can say? In the name, 1 year ago, there was a promise. But what is the reality after 1 year? The first point is very clear. Missionary spirit, speech about unity inside the church, communion inside the church, about human dignity, is very clear in the public speech of the Pope in 1 year. These 4 points, very present. And his theological vision is Christ-centered. Many other popes can prefer another way, more Holy Spirit, more devotion to Mary. Do you remember John Paul II? Also in his arm of coat there was the sign of Mary. In Prevost is very clear the announcement of Christ as the center of the church life. And question that we receive always, also in past week about Leo, it was the question 1 year ago, Pope Leo is in continuity or in discontinuity with his predecessor Francis or Benedict? We can talk is a continuity amid discontinuity. Why? I give you an example. Do you remember in the past 10 years in the Catholic Church, a very key word was synodality? You can say me, also now, this word is very present inside communities. Yes, but what is the meaning of synodality? What is the interpretation of this word? We know in the past years we have several opinions about synodality. For some people was the democracy inside the church, and clergy, bishop and lay people have the same voter in a synod, take decision in the church. Other people has another opinion. Synodality is not democracy, but is collegiality. We can have also other consideration about synodality. If we read the text of Pope Leo, if we can hear his speech, when he talks about synodality, he uses normally another word together, synodality and collegiality. When he met 1 year ago for the first time the secretary of the Synod of Bishops, he used 2 words, synodality and collegiality. So, in this way, we can understand that there is an interpretation of the Pope about synodality. Other examples. Do you know how many extraordinary consistory we had during the pontificate of Pope Francis? What is a consistory? It's a meeting of cardinals. We have meetings of cardinals for the saints, ordinary consistory, but we have also special consistory, extraordinary. Is when the Pope asked cardinals to talk about one point, important point for the future of the Church. During the pontificate of Pope Francis, in 12 years and more weeks, we have 3 consistories. In the pontificate of Pope Leo, we had a consistory in the last January, we have a consistory next month. So in 6 months, 2. So we can understand how it's important for Pope Leo to have this dynamic with the collegiality, with the cardinals, with the bishops, because in next October we will have also a meeting of the president of the National Bishop Conference in the world. So collegiality is the way of Pope Leo in the first year of his pontificate. If we see the appointments in the Roman Curia, you know Roman Curia, what is it? Is the organism, the bodies around the Pope to support his policies for Catholic Church and his policies also in the direction of the world. If we see his appointments, we can see it doesn't prefer polarization, but men of moderation. You can see the list of the new appointments in the past months. I desire to talk with you about an important point, not only internal life of the Church, but in the second part of our speech, remember time because I forgot, about the vision and action of the Pope in international relations. So normally, when we think about the Pope in the world, every of us thinks about own country. So you can think about a relation between Vatican and US, between Italy and the Vatican, etc., etc. But we need, when we think about Vatican and the Pope, we need to have general, international, universal vision. So, when we talk about Catholicism and international relations, we have to think about the role of the religion in our society. When I grew up, there was, during my education in school, high school, university, there was the idea of the Catholicism, the religions don't stay in good life, in good health. But now, in 2026, we can repeat another music. The current century is the century of religions. If in the past decades and century we have in the secularization of the society, Now we stay in a new situation of the desecularization. I give an example about American society. How many new baptisms in the past Easter? Big number in States, big number in France, more and more in Scandinavian, England. So, Western society is not only secularization, but there is a new direction, more religious. So we can think about the 21st century as the century of God. In this way, in Western society, in the other societies, in the global South, the religion is always more and more important, because the religion is able to support people in the virtues, values, in moral decision. A moral decision have consequences in the economy, in politics, social justice, everywhere. So, the role of religions is very, very important. But what is the role of Catholicism in the world? If you see this list, you say in the last 50, 60 years, the Catholicism in the world is between 70.5% or 70.8% of the global society, global world, I don't know, of population. 70.5 is a good number, not too much. We have 80% not Catholic. But the Catholicism is the more important religion for his organization. You can think parishes, hospitals, universities, high school, missions, parishes everywhere. So the Catholic Church has a good organization. So the influences of the Catholicism is more important than this number. In this number, we see a new direction. The Catholicism grew up in some continents and not in others. If we see the representation of Catholicism, the first continent for the number of Catholics in 2024 is America. But the big America, from Canada to Chile. The second continent is Africa. 50 years ago was different. The first continent was Europe. Now Europe is the third continent. Latin America was always first continent. I make a mistake. But US is not Latin America. So we talk about America, but two different souls. Because it is a list, why it is a list? To understand what is the perspective of the Catholicism in the world. The Catholicism is not strong. Normally we use a word, soft power. Catholicism has not militaries, has not the power of economy, of the finance, but his moral power is very important. So I used this image 1 year ago, is the funeral of Pope Francis. Do you recognize two people? One is President Trump, other is President Zelensky of Ukraine. Where is this place? Is St. Peter. It's a church, Catholic church, the heart of Catholicism. St. Peter in Vatican. So, the diplomacy of the Vatican is not a power with strength, but a power of persuasion, moral persuasion. So it was possible to see this image. For our Catholics, we can think about a confession, to be confessions, but it's not a confession, we know. The structure of Vatican diplomacy is very important. The first diplomacy in the world for the numbers of embassies are US, your country. The second is Vatican, for number of representatives. So Pope Leo, when he started his work, has this big system of the Vatican diplomacy to work in the world. But he has also the religious order, the lay association. In Italy is a Catholic association. Here in States, maybe Knight of Columbus. It's an important network to work in the society in relation with the states. What is papal diplomacy? Ars non moriendi. In this international context, Pope Francis, Pope Benedict, Pope John Paul II uses Vatican diplomacy in the direction of the moral values. When we stay under communism in 1/3 of the world, the Vatican diplomacy works to support religious freedom. When we have the fall of communism, Vatican diplomacy worked for the values pro-life. In the recent years, more about general human dignity, or under Pope Francis about ecology. So Pope Leo has this big structure of diplomacy. In the last speech, in the beginning of April, he was talk about moral law. It's a function. In this context, the Vatican, so the Pope himself, talks with everybody, with democracies, with men of people's democracies, authoritarian regimes, dictatorships. It's indifferent. You can say, why? America, you face 2,050 years of democracy. It is the first system. Why the Pope talks with everybody? Because there is a simple criteria, easy criteria, present in the letter from St. Paul to the Romans. There is not authority except from God. Every authority comes from the God. It's not important why you are this authority. Democracy or other way. But you are authority. So the Pope talks with everybody. We can talk about neutrality of the Pope. Vatican's diplomacy talks about active neutrality. because they say we have the idea, general idea of a common good always. Also, when we talk with a dictator, we have this idea of a common good. In this context, also Pope Leo supports the moral vision of the society, and also about religions, interreligious dialogue is not for theological reasons, special theological reasons, but for the peace. It is about international order between states. Now we have everywhere, and everywhere, every time in the world, we have many wars. In front of the wars, we have in the centuries different approach of the Catholic Church. If we see from Second Vatican Council, the Church doesn't use religion for the war, is against violence, but not against the use of the strict force according to the context. I give you an example. We have the army, and we have a chaplaincy in the army, military ordinariate. In this context of the presence of the Church also between army, what is the position of the Church in front of the wars? In this PowerPoint, you can see the different position in the last 40 years, when for the Vatican there was not right to the difference in Balkanian war in 90s, or when the Pope John Paul II was against the preventive war in Iraq, or in our days when we talk about Iran, there was in states a public discussion about what is the just war, because it is expression is also present in the Catholic Catechism. So when we can talk about the first year of Pope Leo is a pope in the continuity of the church history, in the continuity of a theological perspective, social presence of the church. So when we see him, his speech, we have to understand in relation with the past. We can understand what is new or what is in continuity. In this case, we see Pope Leo as Pope Francis talks about the presence of UN, United Nations. But we know in United Nations we have the crossfire of vetoes. So it's a method, multilateral method, but we say also the difficulties of these methods. If we think, it's impossible to read, sorry for the second, third line, it's impossible to read this PowerPoint, I'm very sorry. The question is, in front of the wars, what is the attitude of the Catholic Church, of the Vatican? What is the position? Is it realism or idealism? Is an important point, because the Catholic Church gives always and general vision. After is the responsibility of the people to translate these general principles into decisions. So it's very interesting to see the speech of the popes, Leo, Francis, Benedict, and after the translation in the life. When Pope Leo talks about, example, the war in Ukraine, he talks about authentic, just, and lasting peace. The war is the same direction of the Secretary of the State. But when we talk about Ukraine, we don't talk about only the Moscow, Vatican, Washington, but also about the presence of Orthodox Church. So when we think about Vatican with Pope Leo in an international context, we have to think about states, religions, confessions. We have many actors in this society. So when a Pope talks about peace, he thinks not only about people and states, but also about religions. In this case of Ukraine and Russia, it's very important to understand these ecumenical relations. In the new international order of the 21st century, I finish. 2 minutes. I finish. What is the space for the Holy See? The question is about what is the role of spiritual power in a context of temporal power, political power. We can see after 1 year of Pope Leo is in a continuity of the Vatican tradition to talk about a moral vision of the society, also in front of the human rights. This list is always more and more long. There is not completely agreement. And we talk in our days always more about the fundamental human rights. Because I give you an example. Some people say that abortion is a human rights. For the Catholic Church, no. So you can understand also the public speech of the Pope when he talks about human rights, human dignity. We have to understand with the Catholic vocabulary. In this context of the presence of religions in public debate, the war in Ukraine, the war in other places in the world, the Catholicism with Pope Leo desire to be a voice of moral tension. It's only 1 year of the Pope, it's just 1 year. We have not an encyclical, we are waiting for the first encyclical of the Pope, and so we can understand better and better his vision, but in his acts we can say a presence of unity, communion, and moderation inside the Church, and in international square we can understand a role of a Catholic Church as a moral voice in the society. Also is weak voice, softer power, but is always empower Thank you for your presence and patience. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.